Have you ever noticed that people are obsessed with time? What's steamin' dreamers? Welcome back to another video at the Bay County Public Library with me, Kyle, and chances are you've absolutely noticed that everyone's thinking about time all the time. Time on our watches, we have time on our phones, time to eat, time to lay down, time to get up, time to get off that social media, and time that you spend arguing about how you don't spend your whole life with social media. Time's all around us. We can waste it, spend it, buy it, save it, but what is it? That question's been on my mind all month, and so I've been reading a ton of books at the library to kind of come up with an answer to the question, and I think I've come up with a pretty good idea of what time might be, so stick around and we'll explore that together. Let's get started. So what is time? Thyme is a Mediterranean herb used in stews, soups, and meats. But time is a little harder to define. Aristotle, who lived 2,500 years ago, said that time was the most unknowable of unknowable things. And he was pretty smart, so if he doesn't know what the answer is, tough luck for the rest of us. In fact, and I hate to break this to you, humans have been trying to figure out what time is ever since Aristotle made his first quote. He's proved to be right that most of us don't really know what time is. We spend time, we waste time, we buy time, we save time. We can do all these things with time. We can even measure time. But nobody has a good definition for what time might be. And by good, I mean functional, because if you go online and look at what time is, you get some really astrophysical mumbo jumbo. Way too complicated for a video like this. But that frustrates me, because I'm a STEM instructor and science is supposed to have the answer to everything, so why don't we know what time is? If we look close enough, there's got to be an easy functional definition. Good thing, I think I might have found it. But walk with me for a second through my torturous existence as I try to look into what time was. Let's start with number one. I kind of started looking for my definition of time by going to the past first. It's really neat how you can go back in time, and if you can figure out who a culture was and what they were interested in, you can kind of determine why they might have been looking into time in the first place. Unfortunately, written history only goes back so far, so we don't know if there's anybody in the past who came up with a good definition for time. All we know is that people in the past measured time, because to measure things scientifically, you need tools. And those tools stick around. We can dig them up archaeologically. And the first people that we get a good idea that they had a sense of time were the Egyptians. In 1500 BC, the Egyptian cultures were developing sundials. They're these big stone discs with a rod that sticks up in the middle of them. You might have seen one in your grandma's garden before. They're that common and they still work. You take the rod part of the sundial and you face it north. So when the sun travels east to west throughout the entire day, the shadow that it casts on the rod will slowly change as time changes. As it turns out, it can pretty accurately detect hour-long changes throughout the day. This was mind-blowing. This was top-of-the-line time technology of the time. Nobody had tech like this. It was like the Apple iPhone 12 of time technology. Was it perfect? No, because if it was cloudy or nighttime, you didn't know what time it was. But it was phenomenal for people of that time to understand that there was time at all. And just like the Apple iPhone 12, sundials were expensive, so if you were not a pharaoh, an educator, or another wealthy family at the time, you didn't have a sundial. You didn't even have access to a sundial. So as great as the technology was, it wasn't good for most people. In fact, everyday people like you and me, we didn't even know that time existed in the same way that it exists today. Back in 1500 BC, the common person only understood that time flowed, sort of like from daytime to nighttime. They looked into nature and saw that there were certain events that took place as time was passing, and they used those to gauge about how much time there was left in a day, in the night, or through their business throughout the day. This was my first clue, that for most people throughout most of time that we understand, time didn't exist. All we did was look into nature and take a guess as to what time it was. We were pretty accurate, but people mostly use natural cues in the world around them to tell them what time it is. Now, here was my second clue in my investigation to define time.
It's time to stop, okay? No more.
When I was growing up in 2009, there was a song by Kesha called TikTok. It was super popular, big pop song at the time, Nowadays, nobody knows it exists. If you mention TikTok today, what everybody thinks of is the awesome social media platform that kids and adults across the world are using today. Why am I bringing up TikTok? I promise it's important to this conversation, just bear with me. Have you ever been caught up in social media, or watching a movie that you really enjoy, or engaged in some kind of fun activity? Chances are you didn't see that time was passing so quickly by. In the famous words of some guy at some point, probably a Roman dude, I don't know, time flies when you're having fun. And if time flies when you're having fun, then the opposite is also the case. You have probably been in a class that you don't like, wanting to do the fun things that would usually make time fly, but instead the time seems to stand still. This got me thinking, has there always been these two kinds of times, the fast time and the slow time? Well, actually, yeah. Fast forward with me to a time in the world where most major cities had some kind of clock. You'd think that'd be great because it'd be like modern day where you have a timer just about everywhere. But at this point, clocks were not great. In fact, you needed someone to work with the clock every single day, or whatever clock your city used would be off of time. It'd go too fast or too slow. It becomes really inconvenient when you're trying to conduct business or go to school or do anything on time at all when you have to guess at whether or not the clock is correct. In fact, we use the phrase o'clock without thinking about it, but the phrase came from of the clock. That means that when someone asks you to be somewhere at 6 of the clock, they're referring to a specific clock based on this clock, please be here at this time. Now, whether or not that clock is accurate to the actual time is still up in the air. A lot of people still use their gut to kind of tell them what time it was. When the sun's midway in the sky, it's noon. When it's rising, it's morning. When it's setting, it's evening. People kind of had an internal clock that sometimes contrasted the external clock. So there was apparently a time in history where time wasn't the same for everybody. And that was the second clue. Time is relative. The term relative means that time is different for different people at different times. It doesn't seem like this should be the case, that time should be objective across the board, but what we find is, just like with TikTok or with a boring class or with really slow messed up clocks, that just because you think time is passing at a certain speed doesn't mean that it necessarily is. We understand this personally with our phones and with clocks, but Albert Einstein was actually the person to figure out that time was relative in the first place. Take that as a lesson, Aristotle, because whenever you say that it's impossible to know what time is, that means that some really smart person later on down in history is going to come up with what time was. Chances are his name will begin with A too. And he'll work at a university, and his first child will be a daughter, and you'll both have really weird hair. History's weird, dude. At this point, I had a pretty good theory of time, two really good ideas. I just hadn't put them together yet. Again, the first one was that time is something that we take from nature and the natural cues in the world around us. And number two is that time is relative. It kind of changes based on what you're doing, who you are, and where you are at the time. But things didn't come together for me just yet until I had a particular conversation in February about the Chinese Lunar New Year. I know, Lunar New Year. As you know, we celebrate the New Year's here in the United States on January 1st, every year, every 365 days, give or take a leap day every 4 years. But the Lunar New Year this year took place almost a full month after the regular New Year celebrated in the Gregorian calendar. Why the calendar chaos? Why are the dates for the New Year's different based on who's experiencing the New Year? The answer to that is in the name, lunar. Most of the calendars that we've explored thus far in the video have been solar calendars. They start when the sun comes up and they end when the sun goes down, or they measure the time based on the sun. A lunar calendar is based on the phases of the moon, which is completely different. This blew my mind. Obviously, you can use other natural cues besides the sun, and of course, other cultures who see things differently than we do would have different reasons for having different calendars. In fact, if you do your research, there's over 40 calendars in use today as I speak, more than just the Gregorian calendar that we're used to using. That's when it all came together. When all my calendar and time questions were solved, I came up with my historically accurate, library-approved theory of time. So here's my definition. Time is how long a person has to wait between cues, where both the cue itself and the space between the cues are measured with even more cues. I know, it's super messy, but it makes sense once I explain. Think of the calendar that we use today. 365 days, 12 months, 7 days in a week. In our calendars, we have certain special days, certain holidays like Christmas or Hanukkah or New Year's that we celebrate at given times. We measure the space between those times in days. And a day is measured by a cue of the sun's rising and setting every single day. We measure the time between these special days, which are cues themselves, with other cues. So it makes sense that we just base all of our perception of time on the cues in the world around us. And those cues can come from different cultures, especially here in the United States where we have holidays for everything, including today, which is National Apple Pie Day. You're welcome for reminding you. I know it's easy to forget. In fact, calendars aren't even about measuring time anymore. They're more about measuring what's super special to us. What holidays are you trying to remember? Which birthdays are you trying to count the days till? Which things do you loathe, or which things do you need to get done? Those are all the things that we put on our calendar. Those are the reasons we look at our clock to see what time it is. And those are the things that are important to us. So the real question is, how do you measure your life? Daylight, sunsets, midnight cups of coffee. That song is really starting to make sense now. So, come with me, and we're gonna make our own calendar. One that makes sense for each of us individually. Since time is so relative, you can put whatever you want on it, and I'll be doing the same. So I'll show you how I do it.
First, take a piece of paper, and with a Sharpie or a pencil or anything you want, number this paper 1 through 30. I'm going to do that now. Now start to think of all the things that matter to you. These will be your monthly holidays that you can look forward to every month. For example, maybe you want to pay attention to a pretty full moon outside, like people who use a lunar calendar. The next full moon is on May 26th, so let's pencil that into our calendar. Full Moon Day. It's also called the flower moon in May, just in case you wanted to know. What else do you want to remember? Well, think about everything that matters to you or that you find enjoyable and place it on the calendar. Don't forget to ask your friends or family which things you want to remember to celebrate. How about a bi-monthly game night that happens on the 1st and the 15th? How about a catch up on sleep week? I'm liking 3rd through the 30th. How about a National Drink Coffee Day? I'm thinking like the 18th. If your parents won't let you have coffee, you can substitute it with grape juice. I don't know. How about a play a ton of video games day? Let's play video games today. And of course, we have things like uploading your STEM video, which I kind of have to do on this day too. So let's upload the STEM video. You can basically just take whatever things that you want to remember, things you want to celebrate, things that are important to you, things that have to get done, and put them on your calendar. Then once you've collaborated with your whole family, put the calendar up somewhere, maybe on the refrigerator, and that way everybody will always know what special days you're celebrating.
Thank you guys for watching this STEM video of me trying to figure out what time is and what it means to each of us. It was really fun researching, and if you'd like to research like I did, I have some books right here. I don't know if you can see them all that well, but I'll have a link to those books in the description for you to click. You can check them out from the Northwest Regional Library System, absolutely free. If you like this sort of video, remember to click like. That's how I know how to make videos like this, and subscribe if you're really interested in more STEM related topics like time or science or Albert Einstein. Doesn't matter, I'll talk about anything. Be sure to comment on Facebook if you have a really interesting relationship with time, if you find yourself busy or running out of time, or if you practice some kind of special holiday that you can share with the rest of us. I'd be excited to figure out what that is. So, until next time, stay safe, wash your hands, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.